What's happening? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show, DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle, at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt. This is the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show, taking a look back at racing from this past weekend. That would be the weekend of June the 30th. All sorts of big races, a couple of grade ones. You had the Queen's Plate up at Woodbine. You name it, we've got it covered for you. As we always do, we will also follow things up with a little bit of a stakes montage, some best performances, the best performances from a buyer speed figure standpoint of the past weekend, and then also give you a little bit of a what's on deck for this week on DRF TV. If you listen in podcast form like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, and Spotify. If you are listening on YouTube, click that subscribe button. You'll get all the latest offerings from DRF TV. Give us a thumbs up. If you're over on iTunes, leave us a rating or a review. It'd be greatly appreciated. We're going to kick things off with one of the Grade 1 races, the one race that we will cover from Monmouth Park as far as recaps are concerned. The Grade 1 United Nations, a mile and 3/8 on the turf course. This is the field. 9 signed on, 4 of them trained by Chad Brown. It's Chad's world when we get into these long-distance turf races. This race, no different. He had 4 of them, and he ended up having the favorite in here come post time. That was Money Multiplier. He loves Monmouth Park. The question was going to be, would anyone else step up and get the better of him? In this instance, it was one of the more lightly raced horses, and a horse that has a little bit more versatility as far as, I shouldn't say versatility, but a horse that has more tactical speed than Money Multiplier, who got the job done in gate-to-wire fashion. Here's Frank Miramati with the stretch run of this year's United Nations.
Nominated is trying to get involved. Money Multiplier's had a perfect trip, and he now sets sail after Fantastic with a furlong left to go. Money Multiplier within 2.5 lengths of him. Silver Wave is on the outside in third. Kurilov drops back. Vitorikin is running a big one, but it is Fantastic to take him coast to coast in the United Nations. Money Multiplier.
Fantastic gets the job done in his graded stakes debut for Chad Brown. Antonio Gallardo with the mount at odds of 23-1. He was the longest shot in the field. 1 of 4 trained by Chad Brown. He defeats another Brown entrant, Money Multiplier, the favorite at odds of 2-1, and the old hard hitter, 7 years old, bigger picture for Mike Maker, comes along to finish third at odds of 12-1, rounds things out. If you played the trifecta for 50 cents, it came back $345.40. Let's take a look at Fantastic a little bit more. Here is his horse card. He's 4 of 9 lifetime. He has over $384,000 in career earnings, owned by Three Chimneys Farm, trained by Chad Brown, bred by Bessalou Stables LLC in Kentucky, ridden to victory by Antonio Gallardo. You can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by More Than Ready out of a quiet American mare named Quiet Dance. Let's get into the details and the figures for this race, the United Nations. Fantastic and Money Multiplier both earned 103 buyer speed figures. Fantastic, a 126 time form U.S. rating. Money Multiplier, a 125 time form U.S. rating. The 1 mile split in this race for Timeform US was color-coded red, and if you look at the chart, that is also happens to be the time when Fantastic opens up an extra length on the field. So clearly the pace picked up a little bit in those middle stages, and he was able to just hang on at the mile and 3/8 distance. Bigger Picture earns a 100 buyer and a 123 time form US rating, and then Vitorikin and Silver Wave, they each earn 99 buyers. This was a very heady ride from Gallardo. Chad Brown was very complimentary of this ride, and understandably so. Take the initiative, especially when One Go All Go is content not going, and I still don't know why that was the case, because One Go All Go is a horse that is absolutely at his best when he's on the lead. And they weren't going that fast. 24-1, 48-4 for 3/4, 13-2 for 3/4. I'm sorry, 48-4 for a half mile, 13-2 for 3/4. To me, if you ride One Go All Go, now maybe he's going off form, that's entirely possible, but you didn't give him his best opportunity to win. And conversely, you allowed a horse like Fantastic, who was facing the best company he's ever faced, you allowed him the opportunity to get out there and walk the dog in the front end. Just a couple, tale of two different stories, tale of two different horses and rides, and just really a little bit of a downer if you were a fan of One Go All Go. And also, look, if you liked Fantastic at 23-1, you had to be loving life when they let you just walk out there. Now, Money Multiplier, he came with his run. Can't argue with the way that he finished. He's probably not one of the upper echelon type of horses. And let's call a spade a spade. This is not the best grade 1 field you're ever going to see. This year's United Nations was a little bit on the soft side. But Money multiplier, he's a useful horse. He's still missing that grade 1 victory, and I'd imagine maybe he gets an opportunity up at Saratoga in a race like the Sword Dancer or something along those lines, perhaps a race like the Arlington Million. But he still feels like a notch below the best of the best. So when the horses that ran in the Manhattan show back up, or any of the horses coming from overseas come here, I'm not entirely convinced that these horses are really going to be able to run with the best of the best. This was an opportunity to get a grade 1, and Fantastic was able to do so with a great ride from Gallardo. Some of the other horses that I think we need to make mention of, Profiteer and Kurlov, they had dead heated in their most recent start at Belmont Park. They were both terrible in this spot. First things first, from a gambling standpoint, there is no reason whatsoever. It is completely illogical for you to have a horse like Kurlov go off at 5-2 and a horse like Profiteer go off at 20-1 when they both just dead heated with one another. And from a figure standpoint, they were right there with one another. Now, if you didn't like either one of them, understandably so, but the discrepancy in the wagering should not have been nearly what it was. And oddly enough, Profiteer finished ahead of Kurlov. But they were both terrible. That's really the real story, is just neither one of them picked their feet up in this spot. Oscar nominated, he had a little bit of a wide trip, but Oscar nominated is Oscar nominated. Sometimes he'll come with a decent effort to get a minor award. I don't think he is of this caliber. He is an underneath kind of horse if you play him, in my opinion, only. Silver Wave is really the horse that I'm most interested in. If I had to take anyone out of this race, it would be Silver Wave, simply because Silver Wave was wide every step of the way. Rajiv Mirage had him out in the clear going into the first turn, which ended up being the second turn, because this was a 3-turn race, and he must have run at least 1.5 miles in this spot, and he made a very early move down the backside. Going into the far turn, he went up and was actually stalking the pace. He was just off of Fantastic, and he basically had to go for home early, and that was right when the pace was starting to heat up and starting to develop. So I think Silver Wave actually ran much better than it's going to look here on paper. To me, he's the one that you go into DRF Horse Watch, you put in Silver Wave, and you wait and see where Chad decides to bring him back, because I think this is a deceptively good effort from him. From a speed figure standpoint, it's very competitive, a 99, and if you think with a better trip he runs faster, there you go. I think you've got an interesting case for a horse like Silver Wave. All in all, this is not a field I think that we're going to really be looking back at saying, oh man, that UN, that was the key race of all key races. This older division on turf going long is in turmoil right now. Someone needs to grab the bull by the horns and kind of level this thing out. I would imagine at some point we will see that. But for right now, it's fair game. If you got a horse with a little bit of ability that can go a long distance, run him in any of these races. Fantastic is the example. Fantastic, they finally tested him, and he passes it. He takes this field gate to wire and earns a grade 1 victory in the United Nations for Chad Brown and Antonio Gallardo. 103 Beyer speed figure, 126 time form US rating. Let's head to Woodbine for the Queen's Plate. 3-year-olds going 1.25 miles on the synthetic surface. The Canadian version of the Kentucky Derby, the first leg of the Canadian Triple Crown. You had a field of 16 signed on, and post-time favorite ended up being one of the 2 fillies running, Wonder Godot. Wonder Godot had developed a very, very bad habit of hanging her chances down the lane. She would roll up with a full head of steam, and the minute she got to the leader, she would stop, and she would wait and wait and wait. Well, the blinkers finally went on for Mark Casse here. John Velasquez was reunited with Wonder Godot. They ran so well, running second behind Monomoy Girl in the Kentucky Oaks. And again, an instance where it looked like she may have actually hung there, where maybe if she didn't hang, she would have gotten the job done. She had a full head of steam. We were going to find out if the blinkers were going to be the thing that got her over the top. Sure enough, did they ever. Here's the stretch run to this year's Queen's Plate.
Splitting them is Cooler Mike, and down the outside running on is also ahead by a century. Wonder Godot's in front, and she's dashed away in the Queen's Plate, ahead by a century into second. But there's no doubt who's the best today, and it's all about Wonder Godot, Wonder Woman herself, demolishes them in the Queen's Plate. What a brilliant win. Ahead.
Wonder Godot, at odds of 2-1, wins this year's Queen's Plate $1 million purse for the 3-year-olds. She gets the job done over ahead by a century and Cooler Mike. They run second and third as odds of 28-1 and 46-1 respectively. The trifecta for this race came back enormous for $2, paid over $3 grand. Let's take a little bit of a deeper look, deeper dive at your winner of the Queen's Plate in 2018, Wonder Godot. She is 4 of 12 lifetime. You see she's only been out of the money once from those 12 lifetime starts. She's over $1.1 million, just shy of $1.2 million in career earnings, owned by Gary Barber, trained by Mark Cassie, bred by Anderson Farms, Ontario, incorporated in Ontario. You can see John Velasquez rode her to victory, and the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. She is by Medaglia d'Oro out of a Vindication mare named Loving Vindication. From a figure standpoint, Wonder Godot earns a 95 buyer and a 115 time form U.S. rating. It's worth noting the half, the 3/4, and the mile splits for time form were color-coded red, meaning they were fast, which to me makes this effort that much more impressive for Wonder Godot. She went 1.25 miles for the first time. She was wide every step of the way, for the most part. I shouldn't say that. I mean, early on, the first time down by the stands, she was in mid-pack in and amongst horses, but 2 or 3 passes off the rail, and then she was out in the clear for the rest of the run, and she was relatively close to the pace. When you factor in that it was fast and that final quarter mile, listen to the final quarters of the top 4 finishers. The 4th place finisher, Strike Me Down, who got a little bit stacked up on the far turn, but he ended up wheeling out into the clear and came with a bit of a run. He finished in 26:30. The 3rd place finisher, Cooler Mike, who was relatively close, basically in the same position as Wonder Godot, but down on the inside saving ground, had to wait briefly on the far turn, but he came. He finally got a little bit of running room and went on with it. He finished in 27:17. Ahead by a century, a horse who, again, off the pace in this spot. He was running toward the back of the pack. He came on with a run, finished well, finished in 26:26. Wonder Godot, who was close to that pace, wide every step of the way, she finished in 25:73, considerably faster than anyone else in this field. The blinkers made a world of difference. This is the absolute definition of what blinkers are supposed to do for a horse. If a horse is getting a little bit goofy, looking around, a little bit of whatever else you want to say, hanging like she did, blinkers on, bang, totally different animal. This is a kind of filly that all of a sudden, you know she can act pretty well on dirt. And it sounds like the top 3 finishers are all going on to the second leg of the Canadian Triple Crown. That'll be the Prince of Wales Stakes, I believe, at Fort Erie. All of a sudden, this becomes a fascinating horse, I think, for races at Saratoga. You could be looking at the Alabama particularly is the one that, for me, I look at and I see Monomoy Girl and I say, you know what, she's very, very talented. She's the leader in the clubhouse by far. But 1.25 miles, I don't know if that's really what she wants. You look at a horse like Midnight Bisou, who we'll get to her in a little bit with the Mother Goose. As good as she is, I wonder if she might be better at that one-turn configuration. The one horse that there is no doubt she wants every bit of 10 furlongs is Wonder Godot. And she can act on dirt, and now she's not going to hang like a chandelier. You could be looking at a serious, serious filly, and I wouldn't even rule out the idea of her getting to Churchill Downs for the Breeders' Cup Distaff at 9 furlongs over a surface that she's already had success with. Why not? You get a little bit of pace. She has a little bit of versatility. They went that fast. She was toward the rear, and she moved up, made that little bit of a move coming out of the first turn, and then down the backside was 2 or 3 lengths off of it. I was very taken by this effort. I think she's really, really talented. I've never questioned the talent, but it's very difficult to trust a horse that was going to do what she had done for the first 6 starts of her 3-year-old campaign. Blinkers go on, and credit to Mark Cassie for that. Taking a chance before arguably the biggest race of her career with the exception of the Kentucky Oaks. You made an equipment change, and you made the right equipment change because she dusted this field. And I hate to say this, there's really not much else as far as the rest of the field is concerned that I saw as far as trips are concerned. Telekinesis, and I suppose anyone else that was relatively close to the pace, I'm just not sure why they went as fast as they did. 23, 46, and 4, 11, and 4 for 3/4. Was there really a need to go that fast? Telekinesis is a horse that has shown that he can sit just off the pace and still be effective. Said they were intent on making the front, and he paid the price for it. He finished 5th, which I suppose is kind of a positive and a feather in his cap. I think he's going to be better suited personally on dirt than synth. Whereas with Wonder Godot, I think she is a little bit better on synth, but that doesn't mean that she can't run on dirt. And I also think she's really good on turf. So there are a lot of interesting sort of opportunities now for Wonder Godot going forward. And I think I'm all in. I'm buying whatever stock you have in Wonder Godot going forward for the rest of the year. I'm buying it because this is a horse that'll run all day. Now it looks like she's got her mind on running with the equipment change. Wonder Godot could be a serious, serious filly, and a filly that these other girls are going to have to take serious, even the older horses going forward, if she continues to progress like this and actually take steps forward. Wonder Godot, visually tremendous, winning the Queen's Plate up at Woodbine on Saturday afternoon, the main event of the entire Woodbine meeting. She beats all the other 3-year-olds, including all the boys, with a 95 buyer and a 115 time form US rating. Let's take a look at the one Grade 1 race that was run at Woodbine on Saturday, on Queen's Plate Saturday. The Grade 1 Highlander, it was a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. You had a field of 9 signed on. Your post-time favorite was Long On Value, the 7-year-old making his second start for Brad Cox. Second start off of a layoff. Visually very, very impressive, winning most recently at Churchill Downs, going 5/8 of a mile, and we know he's run well at Woodbine in the past. But he'd have to work pretty hard to run down what I think is a very, very talented filly. Long On Value gets the job done. Here's the stretch run of this year's Highlander.
Turns in front. In second, Corinthian Knight. Lady Alexandra on the outside. Premier's next, and down the outer, Belvoir Bay. Lady Alexandra going up. Takes over narrowly from Axtell. Premier on the inside, squeezed and running home now. Long On Value's coming on strongly out wider. Lady Alexandra by a length. Long On Value finishing okay. And these two will battle it out to the wire. As they go down to the wire ahead, Bob, Long On Value got up to win it from Lady Alex.
Long On Value gets the job done as the 2-1 favorite, running down Lady Alexandra, who I thought ran a bang-up race. We'll talk about her a little bit more momentarily. She runs second for Graham Motion, and Holding Gold rounds things out for Mark Cassie, finishing third at odds of 7-2. Let's take a look at Long On Value, who is now over $1 million in career earnings. He's 9 of 32 lifetime, over $1.1 million in career earnings, owned by Madicket Stables LLC, 10 Strike Racing, and Steve Lehman, trained by Brad Cox, bred by Snow Lantern Thoroughbreds in Virginia. Ridden to victory by Florent Giroux, and you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. He is by Value Plus out of an Orientate mare named Long Message. 104 buyer, 121 time form US rating for Long On Value, winning the Grade 1 Highlander, a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. This is a horse that I think he's a threat in any one-turn turf race that you could possibly run him in. Whether it's the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, whether you choose to stretch him out to a mile in a race like the Woodbine Mile, I think this horse is really, really talented. Not too concerned at this point. Look, he's 7 years old and swapping to the leads down the lane. It is what it is. He finished in 10.94 for that final 1/8 of a mile. This horse has got a tremendous, tremendous late kick. Again, you've got to view him as a threat in any of these types of races. And again, he's won the win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup, and you know he can handle Churchill Downs. So there's a lot to like about Long On Value at 7 years old. As far as Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint chances are concerned, the way that this race was run, I'm looking at the first, the third, and the fourth, and even the fifth place finishers, where they came half mile into the race. The winner was in 6th. The third place finisher was in 9th. 4th was in 7th, 5th was in 8th, in a field of 9. The runner-up, Lady Alexandra, was up there just 1 length off the pace. She took this thing over about mid-stretch, opened up on the field, and it took every bit for Long On Value to run her down. I think you can make a legitimate case that Lady Alexandra ran every bit as well, if not better than Long On Value in this race on Saturday afternoon for Graham Motion. I know she got in light as opposed to some of the other horses. And then, look, if you're going to take weight into consideration, to me, sprints are kind of important when you look at it. And you see that Long On Value, he only carried 117. Lady Alexandra 115. And third place finisher, Holding Gold, he came in as the high weight at 123. But I look at Lady Alexandra and say that tactical speed that she has, she backed up that race at Belmont Park with that 104 buyer. She earns a 103 here. I loved everything about this. I think it was a combination of her being as close to the pace as she was and that 6th furlong that might have just been a little bit too much to hold off an unbelievably talented horse in Long On Value. Lady Alexandra, to me, is the kind of horse that if you were somehow finding a way to get down on a future for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, I think Lady Alexandra is the kind of horse that, you know what, she doesn't need to go to the lead. She's probably not fast enough to make the lead, if we're being honest. But she's also not going to come from the back of the pack. And that's the danger for a horse like Long On Value. As good as he is in these sprint races, he's going to come from well off of it. And at that point, you got a lot going on there. And in a race like the Breeders' Cup, and I am thinking forward to the Breeders' Cup for these top 2 and even the top 3. Holding Gold, I think that distance getting a little bit shorter in the Breeders' Cup. That's going to be ideal for him because 6 furlongs, I think, is just a little bit too far for him. I'm looking at it saying Long On Value, you're probably going to have to come wide in a 14-horse field. Coming from the back of the pack, there's going to be traffic. You might get stacked up. Lady Alexandra could be one of those horses that bang is right there just off the flank of whoever the pace setter is. Take this thing over, turn him for home, and come and catch me. I was just really, really taken by her effort in here, just as much as Long On Values. I think the top 2 both are in bang-up races. I've always been a fan of Holding Gold. I'm starting to wonder if he is just a slight notch below the best, but that doesn't mean that he can't make a ton of money and run competitively and get involved and get pieces, minor awards, and big races like this as I drop my pen. I'm getting excited over here. Belvoir Bay, I think she's a nice horse. And I don't mean to just glass over ABBA, but at 39-1, you came with a nice effort. I think the connections have got to be thrilled. I don't think this is a horse that we're looking at going forward as a legitimate threat in any of these monster races. Belvoir Bay, I just think she is a monster going down the hill. And I mentioned it when we did the stakes preview for this race. You can find that over on video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel. Going west to east is not easy at all, particularly on turf. We've seen so often the turf horses, when they go east to west, the East Coast horses are usually much better. Belvoir Bay has an affinity for that 6.5 furlong downhill course at Santa Anita. And you know what? The good news is there were plenty of instances during the Santa Anita meeting for her to take advantage of that. She's good at 5/8, she's good at 6, but she's much, much better going 6.5 down the hill, and I think that's probably where she's going to make her hay. Doesn't mean that she can't be competitive in some of these other spots, but I just think she is significantly better going down the hill at Santa Anita. If you're going to take a look at one other horse coming out of this race, it's probably Imprimis or Imprimis, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I don't know what the true pronunciation is. I'm going to call him Imprimis just because whatever. This horse, it looked like he was trying to make a little bit of a move down the lane. Now, the problem is he goes down to the inside with Rosario. It gets very, very tight. He's got to check, and he basically loses all chance. I guess the only thing that I'm a little bit unsure of was the horse actually kicking on? Was he running on? I think he would have done okay. I don't think he was going to be any match for the top two, though. And that's the only thing that makes it a little bit difficult. Everybody and their brother saw him get steady down on the inside. But realistically, was he actually going to threaten? We'll never know, and we'll find out where he shows up next. I think he's a very talented horse. I don't think anybody's saying otherwise, but I'm not entirely convinced that all of a sudden because he got checked, that means that, oh, well, you know what, next time out, look out for him. I don't know that he was ever going to threaten the top two. I wonder if he would have been there for third, a good length and a half, 2 lengths off of those top two, battling it out with Holding Gold for a minor share. Imprimis, he's a nice, talented horse. He's very lightly raced. There's no reason to think he can't continue to improve. I'm not convinced that he is of the same caliber right now anyway as those top two horses. And I think the top two are very, very strong. And I think they need to be looked at on the short list of true legitimate contenders for a race like the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, win and you're in this race, the Grade 1 Highlander was. So that means that long on value, he's in. Expenses paid. They're running in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint at Churchill Downs the first weekend in November. But also keep an eye on the runner-up, Lady Alexandra. Very, very impressed by her. Long on value gets the job done with a 104 Beyer and a 121 Timeform US rating in the Grade 1 Highlander. There was another win and you're in race for the Breeders' Cup run on Saturday, this time in South Florida at Gulfstream Park. This was the field for the Princess Rooney, a Grade 2 event, fillies and mares 3-year-olds and up. Only 8 signed on in here. You had co-favorites in here. You had My Miss Tappet for Todd Pletcher. You had Curlin's Approval for Happy Alter, the horse that just absolutely adores Gulfstream Park. And then after that, maybe with the exception of Miss Locust Point, who went off at 3-1, you had double-digit odds everywhere else. And you had a couple of horses that had a little bit of tactical speed at double-digit odds that if for one reason or another some of the big girls didn't fire, maybe they were interesting alternatives. Had a little bit of a shocking development and a shocking upset in this race. Here's the stretch run of this year's Princess Rooney.
Locust Point had no response from the back in My Miss Tappet. 3/16 to go. Wilbur Garcia and Stormy Embrace for the Kathleen O'Connell barn in front by 5 with just 1/8 of a mile to go. And she's turning this into a runaway. The Princess Rooney to Stormy Embrace. Stormy Embrace with a powerhouse performance. She punches her ticket to the Breeders' Cup and wins.
Stormy Embrace wins emphatically this year's Princess Rooney, a Grade 2 event. She is in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint now, winning a win and you're in race at odds of 15-1. Rich Mommy comes from basically dead last to run second at odds of 14-1. That exacta alone for a buck comes back 161.20, excuse me. And the third place finisher, My Miss Tappet, going out for Pletcher at odds of 7-5, runs third. Let's take a look at the winner a little bit more in depth. Stormy Embrace. She is 7 of 19 lifetime. You see that she's only been out of the money on 5 occasions from 19 lifetime starts. She's over $452,000 in career earnings, owned by Matalona Thoroughbreds LLC, trained by Kathleen O'Connell, bred by Matalona Thoroughbreds LLC in the state of Florida, ridden to victory by Wilmer Garcia, and you see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. She is by Circular Key out of a Stormy Atlantic mare named Stormy Allure. 97 Beyer speed figure, 115 time form U.S. rating for Stormy Embrace's 6-length victory in the Princess Rooney. Worth noting, the interior fractions of this race color-coded blue for time form U.S. And it's a little bit of an interesting race to go through and break down, because when you look at the way that this field looks as far as the chart is concerned, your second and third place finishers came from last and second to last, and the winner was a gate-to-wire, just absolute powerhouse effort. There are a couple of little pieces that need to be noted, though. Curlin's Approval did not have the cleanest of trips. Early on, she was mid-pack. She was pushed along a little bit by Luis Saez. Rounding the far turn, she's in between horses. She is steadied and shuffled back. Basically lost all chance at that point, considering the way that the winner, eventual winner, was traveling on the front end. Spanish Harlem looked like a winner for a moment, rolling up on the far outside, going back to the dirt after running in a turf route. Unfortunately for her, she flattened out quite badly and faded it and finished up the track. And that is kind of the signal, or the situation with the second, third, and fourth place runners at the half-mile point. They basically all ended up the track. You see those, basically, the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and 8th place finishers in this race, they were forwardly placed for the most part throughout, and they were nowhere at the end. So I'm having a hard time deciding. I see that those blue fractions, the blue interior, splits for time form U.S., but the chart is kind of telling me a different story. And if you believe that, then maybe Stormy Embrace's effort is that much more impressive. Now, I said in the stakes preview we did for this video, for this race, that Stormy Embrace, to me, unfortunately, those horses that are stationed at Tampa over the winter, they usually just don't class up to the horses across the state at Gulfstream. So this race, for me, was a little bit of a surprise, because I've always liked Stormy Embrace, but I've never looked at her like this. I've never looked at her as a high 90 sort of horse that can go out there and... let's call a spade a spade. The filly and mare sprinters for a race like the Breeders' Cup, they have not been strong over the past number of years. When you look and see some of these crazy results that have happened in those races, and from a speed figure standpoint, a 97 in most years is going to win. If you believe that all of a sudden this is what Stormy Embrace is, and Kathleen O'Connell has said that these connections, they earn their way to the Breeders' Cup, they're going to go. I don't know. Is this actually what she is now? I thought Rich Mommy ran just fine, but Rich Mommy to me is not a 7-furlong horse. She's much better at 3/4, and she needs a little bit of hitting up front for her to really have a big chance to come with a run. But then when you see that Curlin's Approval, okay, even with that little bit of trouble early on, she didn't really fire. My Miss Tappet, probably a little bit overrated. Ms. Loca's Point, I'm not entirely sure why they didn't go on with it. 22-3, 45-1 were the early splits in this race. Her best asset is her speed. Go. Clear off to the front. Make somebody else make a decision. When you ride her that way, so passively down on the inside, this is kind of her MO. If she doesn't get the front, she's going to have a hard time. Stormy Embrace, she ran really well. There's really no denying that. She finished in 12:84. I'm a little bit curious. I don't know what to do with this race going forward. Really, we're probably going to need to wait and see what some of these horses do coming out of this race before you can make any sort of real determination. But at the end of the day, it was a big effort from Stormy Embrace. The best race of her career by far. Then it happens to come the biggest race of her career by far. She gets the job done in the Grade 2 Princess Rooney. A win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. 97 Beyer, 115 time form U.S. rating. Already touched on the emphatic effort from Wonder Godot in the Queen's Plate on Saturday afternoon. 3-year-old fillies at Belmont Park going a mile on the 16th, one-turn configuration. Only a field of 4 for the Mother Goose. But you had two big sort of stories in this spot. You had a horse that looked like she could be loose on the lead, and she was unbeaten. And by the way, she'd handed Monomoy Girl her only loss to date. That's road to victory for Mark Casse. But then you also had the real name in this race, the real story. Midnight Bisou making her first start for Steve Asmussen. She'd been transitioned over from the West Coast with Bill Spar. Not that there was anything that had happened there with Spar's camp. It was just more a matter of Asmussen here on the East Coast. There are more opportunities for 3-year-old fillies on the East Coast throughout the summer than there are on the West Coast. That's why it was a business decision. Move her over to the East Coast. This was her first start, and we were going to see what we were going to get with the new barn, the new connections, the new outfit. Midnight Bisou, would she be as good as she was, and would she be able to handle a loose on the lead horse and road to victory? An emphatic answer. Larry Colmus with the stretch run of the Mother Goose.
returns for home on top in the Mother Goose. An all-out drive for Road to Victory on the inside. My Miss Lily has taken third. Mike Smith riding with confidence here on Midnight Bijou. And she is pulling away and pulling away impressively. Midnight Bijou, a very strong performance in the Mother Goose.
Midnight Bijou never, ever out of first gear. She wins by 6 lengths with Mike Smith aboard in the Grade 2 Mother Goose. Your runner-up is that Loose on the lead horse, Road to Victory. She didn't run poorly, but she was certainly no match for the winner, Midnight Bijou. And My Miss Lily runs third in there with Flavian Pratt aboard for Mark Henning. She is, again, no match for Road to Victory, who is no match for Midnight Bijou. Let's dive into Midnight Bijou a little bit deeper in the horse card. You can see she's 4 of 7 lifetime. She's never been out of the money. She's over $691,000 in career earnings. She's owned by Bloom Racing Stable, Madicket Stables LLC, and Allen Racing LLC, trained by Steve Asmussen, bred by Woodford Thoroughbreds in Kentucky, ridden to victory again by Mike Smith. And you see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. She is by Midnight Loot out of a Repent mare named Diva Delight. Now, the figures for a race like this, for a horse like this, Midnight Bijou, they don't tell the whole story. She earned a 94 Beyer and a 117 Time Form US rating. You look at the fractions, the quarter, the half, and the 3/4 Time Form US have color-coded blue, meaning they were slow, which is to be expected. There wasn't a lot of pace signed on in this race. But you look at the fractions at face value, 23 and 3, 46 and 4. They weren't, I don't think those are crawling slow, but at the same time, I don't think they're fast by any stretch of the imagination for this level and this caliber of talent. But the real story here, for me, with the figures, Midnight Bijou was never asked to run a step. She had her ears pricked just rolling around on the far outside around the turn, and then when she just got to the top of the lane, she kicked away for fun. Meanwhile, everybody else is in an all-out drive. This, to me, was one of the most impressive performances we've seen from a 3-year-old filly thus far. More impressive than Monomoy Girl. I think as impressive as Wonder Godot earlier in the day, or right about the same time in the Queen's Plate up at Woodbine. The question now becomes, and I tweeted it after this race was final, that this was a tremendous performance. She came home in 30:07 for sort of comparison's sake. My Miss Lily, who was one of the horses trying to finish a little bit at the end, she came home in 30:96. So we're talking 5 lengths difference. And really, you can see it by the chart. What do you do with Midnight Bijou going forward? Saratoga, you're going to run in those big races, I would imagine. You'll run in the Coaching Club American Oaks. You'll try to run in the Alabama. You'll run in those types. But year-end, Breeders' Cup time, do you run her in a race like the Distaff, where you're going to have, in theory, Unique Bella? You'll have a horse like Monomoy Girl. You'll have a horse probably like Wonder Godot. All of these horses really strong at 1 1/8. And I'm not suggesting that Midnight Bijou can't get 1 1/8. But, Abel Tasman, by the way, forgot about her. You see what you saw earlier in the day in a race like the Princess Rooney, where Stormy Embrace kind of comes out of nowhere and wins by the length of the stretch with a 97 Beyer. If you have the connection to Midnight Bijou, is it in the back of your mind saying, you know what, Breeders' Cup time, hopefully as a 4-year-old, we'll have an opportunity for a race like the Distaff, but maybe we put all of our eggs into the filly and mare sprint basket, because we've seen her be very, very effective going shorter distances as well. It's not like she's a one-dimensional kind of filly. She's shown that she can adapt to different pace situations. She can lay closer to the pace. She can come farther off of it. I wonder, to me, anyway, if I was involved with the horse, I would go with the normal route as far as the 3-year-old fillies are concerned for the rest of the summer. Run in the Saratoga races. If you want to run in the Cotillion at Parks in September, do that as well. But I would be looking at it saying, how am I plotting this out? I want to go routes all the way through up until the Breeders' Cup. And then Breeders' Cup Saturday, we turn her back for the filly and mare sprint. And you have arguably the favorite in there. I think she's a tremendous talent. We've talked about it since she was 2. Everybody here at the Racing Forum, we think that she's just unbelievable. One of the most talented 3-year-olds, clearly, male or female. She was awesome in this spot. Very, very impressive winning the Mother Goose. As for the other 3 horses, Road to Victory, I don't think she ran terrible, but at the same time, she's clearly no match for Midnight Bijou, and I wonder, you try to get her back to turf, probably going a little bit shorter as well. My Miss Lily makes you wonder about that Aqueduct race leading into the Kentucky Oaks. How good was it really? Bit of a blanket finish there. There really hasn't been a lot of strong performances coming out of that race. And as far as Indy Union is concerned, I think she's the kind of horse that just wants to run all day. I don't think she's particularly fast, but I think she'll be able to stay routes of ground, serious routes of ground, better off than some of these other girls. So again, a race like the Alabama, if she all of a sudden ran 3rd or 2nd in a race like that at 30 or 40 to 1, I wouldn't be stunned, just because her pedigree would suggest she's just going to clunk along. But at the end of the day, there was really one horse in this race, and coming out of it, I think she's a fascinating horse going forward, and that's Midnight Bisou. She continues to add to her resume. And look, Steve Asmussen, he's got a good one on his hands now. Midnight Bisou wins the Grade 2 Mother Goose at Belmont Park on Saturday. 94 Beyer, 117 time form U.S. rating, but the figs don't tell the whole story. This was a much more impressive performance than those numbers would indicate. Older fillies and mares going 1.25 miles up at Woodbine Saturday afternoon. This is the field for the Dance Smartly, a Grade 2 event. Chad Brown's usually well represented in the United States. He's also well represented in Canada when he shows up with some nice graded stakes runners. He had Santa Monica and Inflexibility in this spot, and it felt like Santa Monica still needed to prove that she could actually step with some of the better fillies and mares as far as the turf is concerned. And Inflexibility, the one thing you knew about her was she loved Woodbine, and she could fire fresh off the bench. I think some people probably figured a Chad Brown exacta was a logical explanation or a logical result. I just don't know if people expected it to be from the pace setter and the horse coming from dead last. Here's the stretch run of this year's Dance Smartly.
Inflexibility in front, up the inside Starship Jubilee, down the outside Mythical Mission. Holy Helena's running home well, and right out wide here comes Santa Monica, and Santa Monica coming alive. Inflexibility in front, Santa Monica on the outside racing up to join, and Santa Monica burst to the front of the Dance Smartly, and it is Santa Monica coming on to win. Santa Monica wins by a half a length. Inflexibility second.
Santa Monica from last gets the job done for Chad and Jose Ortiz, beating out Javier and Chad with Inflexibility in second. Holy Helena, the winner of last year's Queen's Plate, she finishes third in here for the Stronach group. Ultimately, this was a formful race where your top three choices ran some variation of 1, 2, and 3 in here. Santa Monica, let's talk a little bit more about her, shall we? She is a very, very talented horse. She's 5 years old at this point. Now she proved that she actually belongs. She is 4 of 25 lifetime, and keep in mind, she's only been here for a little while for Chad. She's over $247,000 in career earnings, owned by Mrs. John Magner, Madicket Stables, LLC, and Darren Pearson, trained by Chad Brown, bred by DJ Irwin Bloodstock in Great Britain, ridden to victory by Jose Ortiz, as we've already stated. You can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card by Master Craftsman out of a Zamindar mare named Zachara. My goodness, I apologize. 100 Beyer for Santa Monica. Let's get into the nuts and bolts, things that I can pronounce. 100 Beyer speed figure, 122 time form U.S. rating for Santa Monica, winning the Dance Smartly. For what it's worth, time form U.S. has the 3/4 and the mile splits, both color-coded red, meaning they're fast fractions, which is why, as good as Santa Monica ran in here, I think she had a pretty good setup in this spot. When you consider that her and the third and the fourth place finishers, they all came from well out of it. I think they had a very advantageous sort of pace situation to run at that day at Woodbine on Saturday. Conversely, I think Inflexibility ran an enormous race. Just a giant, giant race. To be out there, she was a little bit keen early on. Javier got her out into the clear, and she just kind of cruised up. She brushed up, made the front when they came out of the first turn, and for a minute I thought she was a bit of a runoff. But when you look at the fractions, you see 25 and 349, 12 and 2. It's worth noting Woodbine has had some issues with their timing recently, so many of these races are hand-timed. I thought she ran a giant race, considering she went out there, and anybody else that was remotely close to her finished up the track. And I understand some of them were more sort of on the longer side of prices anyway, and longer chances. But I thought Inflexibility ran a giant race, considering she never really stopped at any point. She came home in 23:65. It took a buzzsaw and a run-coupled stablemate to run her down in 22:69. So I think the top two both ran giant, giant races. I think Inflexibility, to be fair, maybe she's a little bit better going slightly shorter, maybe 1 1/8 as opposed to 1 1/4. And Santa Monica, look, the rich get richer. Chad now all of a sudden has a horse that, 1 1/4 is not a problem for her. But the way that she finished, it makes you wonder, can you stretch her out to 1.5 miles? Can you get her involved in some of these other big races? And I would wonder, 1 1/4 happens to be pretty darn close to the same distance as a race called the Beverly D, which Chad has had major success with at Arlington Park. That's going to be at 1 3/16. So maybe a horse like Santa Monica fits in a race like that. Maybe a horse like Inflexibility fits in a race like that. There are a number of positions where these horses can go now throughout the rest of the country, and Chad's in a very, very advantageous position with them. Holy Helena, I think she's good. This is the kind of race between the most recent start when she ran at Belmont on Belmont Stakes weekend and this race here. It makes me wonder if she is not a slight notch below the best of the best, the cream of the crop, if she can't run with Chad's good horses. I think she's very, very talented. I would like to see them maybe try something a little bit different with her. Maybe, keep in mind, she actually won a race on dirt at one point in her career, or very early on. maybe you see if she can do that again. Maybe you see if synthetic works for her again. I know she's good. I don't know if she is cream of the crop good, like those top two look like they could possibly be. And I have to be honest, even in flexibility, I'm not totally convinced that she is cream of the crop. But this was a giant effort from her considering the pace dynamics. Bletchley thought it was a decent enough effort for this little bit of a longer price for Mark Casse. A couple of disappointing efforts in here. Starship Jubilee, I don't want to say it's a total disappointment because she was close to those hot fractions. And also this distance I just never thought was going to be beneficial for her. Dream Dancing, you got to start to wonder now, where is she? She's a grade 1 winner as a 3-year-old, but realistically, she hasn't registered a proper grade 1 performance for quite some time. And I wonder if she needs to just be put away for a little while. Either that, or keep in mind, her major success came out at Del Mar. Maybe you ship her out to the West Coast for the summer. There are other instances and other opportunities for her out there, and probably against some softer company as well. But really, no denying, look, again, when you have a graded stakes race on turf, Chad Brown's going to be heard from. And this is not the first time he's completed an exacta integrated stakes race. Maybe it might be the first time at Woodbine, but Chad Brown, the exacta, he gets the job done with Santa Monica ahead of Inflexibility. Santa Monica earns a 100 Beyer and a 122 time form US rating. Inflexibility, a 99 Beyer and a 122 time form US rating. Santa Monica, maybe she can go a little bit farther. Inflexibility, though, I thought she ran a bang-up race here considering she was the only part of the pace sticking around late in the Dance Smartly. Last race we'll do the deep dive in for this week's recap edition is from Woodbine as well. This is the field for the King Edward Stakes, going a 1-turn mile. 3-year-olds and up, a field of 8. Your favorite at post time was Delta Prince, going out for Jimmy Jerkins, Javier Castellano, the little brother of Royal Delta. He's always been highly thought of. He's always run pretty representative races. He's very, very talented. But this was going to be a lot to be thrown at him. 1-turn mile, that stretch run at Woodbine goes on forever and a day. He hadn't been seen in something crazy like almost 300 days. Been gone for quite some time. And really, you're going to have to overcome probably a lack of pace in a race like this, where a horse like Shakamat looked like he was going to be able to break loose on the front end. Either that, or maybe he would take a little bit of token pressure from First Premio or someone else. But Delta Prince, okay, favorite, going to have a lot thrown at him. Ultimately, he overcomes it all and gets the job done. Here's the stretch run of this year's King Edward.
And Shakamat's in front, out by almost a length and a half. Here comes Delta Prince coming home fairly strongly, and Delta Prince shoots for the lead on the outside. Behind them, Conquest Panthera starting to explode, but ran about as Delta Prince hit the front. Delta Prince the leader, Shakamat in second, then Caribou Club and Conquest Panthera, and it is Delta Prince in the King Eddie, and Delta Prince and Javier Castellano by over a length. Shakamat again second, Conquest Panthera.
Delta Prince, your winner at odds of 2-1, gets the job done over Shakamat, who is a very game pace setter. And again, Shakamat's the kind of horse that will do this to you. If you let him walk on the front end, he can make you pay. He runs second at odds of 19-1, and your third place finisher, Conquest Panthera, for Husbands and Cassie, comes on a little bit late at the end, coming from last at odds of 5-1. Rounds out your trifecta that if you played it for $2, comes back $559.30. Let's take a look at Delta Prince a little bit deeper. 4 of 8 lifetime, never been out of the money in 8 lifetime starts. $263,626 in career earnings. Owned by Astronic Stables, trained by Jimmy Jerkins, bred by Adina Springs in Kentucky. You can see Javier was aboard for the ride, and you see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. I already made mention. He is the little brother to Royal Delta. He is by Street Cry out of the AP Indy mare named Delta Prince. 101 Beyer speed figure, 122 time form US rating for Delta Prince winning this race. Time form US had the quarter, the half, and the 3/4 splits, all color-coded blue, meaning slow fractions, making it that much more difficult for horses coming from off of the pace to make up some ground, and helping horses like Shakamat who are out there dictating things on the front end. Delta Prince, I think this was a good starting off point. Frank Stronach, after the race, he said, you know what, the Woodbine Mile seems like a pretty good sort of long-term target. That's going to be the second week in September. Wouldn't be surprised at all if this horse ended up getting to that point. He ran just fine. He was back on his left lead for probably the final eighth of a mile. I didn't love that, but considering that long stretch, considering the long layoff, and considering he needed to get into the run a little bit earlier probably than they would have liked, I thought he ran quite well. I really have no knocks about this effort. Shakamat, I made mention, he'll make you pay if you give him this. Give him an inch, he'll take a mile. Realistically, though, you get some other pace in a race like this, he's not going to do what he did on Saturday. He'll end up finishing up the track. Shakamat, he'll take advantage of circumstances. Conquest Panthera, mentioned it when we did the stakes preview for this race. I don't think a mile is what he wants. I don't think 6 furlongs is what he wants. 7/8 is probably right in his wheelhouse. Then the question becomes, is he actually good enough? I've always liked him. There's always been some ability. He earned some respective figures in here, a 97 Beyer and a 119 time form US rating. I was very high on Caribou Club coming into this spot. He was the one that actually took up sort of the stalking trip in here, and I thought he might be a little bit farther back, but with the lack of pace, not totally shocked that that's actually where he ended up taking up his real estate. I thought he ran okay, and just okay. I was disappointed in the effort. I expected a little bit more. Perhaps he bounced a little bit from that most recent start. That was far and away the best race of his career. Comes back down to earth a little bit here with a 95. I don't totally want to write him off because I think there's still some ability there, but this was a little bit of a disappointing effort from Caribou Club. The real I suppose, you can look at this a couple different ways. Ring weekend, I wasn't surprised that he didn't run particularly well because at this point, I think he's done a lot. He's had a lot of things thrown at him. He's 7 years old. He's had a number of injuries. Graham Motion's done an unbelievable job to get as much out of him as they have. So I wasn't totally shocked that he ran 7th. Tower of Texas never offered anything. And I understand the fractions were slow and the pace probably worked against him. But Tower of Texas, this is kind of his game. I still think he's better at 7/8 of a mile too. But Woodbine, this is what he wants, that one-turn configuration. And the fact that there was no kick whatsoever, and you still got a little bit of a run from a horse coming from off of it like Conquest Panthera. Perhaps you want to upgrade his effort because of the lack of pace. Tower of Texas, to me, this was a bit of an alarming performance because he's very rarely thrown complete clunkers in there. And he's 7 years old. He's no spring chicken. You wonder if he's starting to feel the effects of a lot of racing throughout his career. Disappointing effort. Don't totally want to write him off just yet because he's done too many good things in the past to just say it's over. But this is a little bit of a lackluster effort that I'd like to see. Gotta have some sort of a rebound here pretty quick. Delta Prince, though, for a pretty lightly raced horse to accomplish what he's accomplished so far off of this sort of a layoff and over different configurations, talent is there. The bloodlines are certainly there. We'll find out where Jimmy Jerkins plots that next race for him, whether they go to Saratoga or whether they just try to maintain him and get him ready for a race like the Woodbine Mile, as Frank Stronach alluded to. Delta Prince, impressive getting the job done in the King Edward with a 101 buyer and a 122 Timeform US rating. As we normally do here on the recap edition, we're going to dive into this week's stakes montage. You're going to get racing action from Gulfstream Park, Monmouth Park, Belmont, Woodbine, you name it. We'll have a plenty. Nice little platter going your way. A few different races, different things here and there. Here's this week's stakes montage.
To go, and Misael Jaramillo and XY Jet have the lead. Shifting ground was Reason to Soar to try to bridge the gap second. Sweet on the Ladies is running home for a slice, but inside the final furlong, one of the best sprinters in the world is right here in Hallandale Beach, and he'll go gate to wire in the Smile Sprint. He's XY Jet, and he goes all the way. Reason to Soar second. Sweet and Phantom Row from the back, and Noble Drama 3/16 to go. It's War Giant off the turn with the lead. 2.5 lengths clear of sighted second. Noble Drama charging hard on the outside, but time ticking away, and War Giant still well clear. 8-5 the number, and War Giant, a completely new racehorse. He's so good lately, and he'll win the carryback. He'll win it by 5 in the end. Noble Drama was outside. Special Event and Viva Vegas, they straighten away for home, and Dream a While has a 2-length lead with a host of pursuers. Special Event running a very good race. Alicia's World is on the outside. They're coming to the 16th pole, and it's Dream a While. Special Event trying so hard, but Dream a While simply too good in the Eatontown. Special Event, a 3-length lead. Backside of the Moon at the rail, Paige McKenney and Imperative. They're coming to the 8th pole, and it's a hand ride for Harlan Punch, dominating. He's in front by 5. Paige McKenney an honest second, and then Backside of the Moon. It was a one-horse race. Harlan Punch crushes in the Island. Wins by a half dozen. Paige McKenney second.
Behind those are Princess Gibraltar, who saves all the ground, and In the Lee, who comes up on the far outside. And now it is La Sardane on top by a length, but Pas de Souci is running at her. Nothing here from Thais. In the Lee is closing on the far outside. Still La Sardane holding off Pas de Souci, and In the Lee coming down the line. La Sardane wins the perfect sting.
Moonlit Garden means business on the outside of Divine Miss Gray and puts her head in front with a furlong left to go. Total Control is 7 lengths back in third, and Divine Miss Gray fights back bravely on the inside of Moonlit Garden. Divine Miss Gray has another gear under Kendrick Carmouche, and they will win the Ladies' Secret by 3/4 of a length.
Slam. Melmich on the outside has hit the front, and back in third, Gigantic Breeze. Are you kidding me? Down the outside, and Tizza Slam's not done with. It's Tizza Slam back in front. Melmich on the outside. Tizza Slam running the race of his life and is going on to win the Dominion Day. What a win. Tizza Slam by a length to Melmich. Are you kidding me?
There you have it, this week's stakes montage. And 'Tis a Slam. I liked him 2 starts back. He didn't do any running. He shows up there and gets the job done in pretty impressive fashion in the Dominion Day up at Woodbine. Let's dive into the weekend's best performances from a Beyer speed figure standpoint. We've got them all covered for you here on the Matt Bernier Show. Let's take a look. 3-year-old males on dirt. War Giant, 94 Beyer in the carry back down at Gulfstream Park. 3-year-old fillies on dirt. Now, again, I've made mention about this in the past. The DRF internal system, they include synthetic races as dirt races. So Wonder Godot technically leads this pack, but that was a synthetic race. She earned a 95 in the Queen's Plate at Woodbine. 3-year-old males on turf. Corinthia Knight. Now, that just goes to show how weak the 3-year-old males on turf were this week. There were hardly any performances. This horse earned an 83 in the Highlander, running dead last. He's taking on older horses. He had a lot thrown at him. But still, the fact that there were no other 3-year-old males on turf that eclipsed that performance, a little bit surprising. 3-year-old fillies on turf. Sweet Sting, an 87 Beyer, and a non-winners of 1 other than at Belmont Park. Older males on dirt. CZ Rocket with a 103 Beyer speed figure winning the Kelly's Landing at Churchill Downs. Older fillies on dirt. We already talked about Stormy Embrace earlier in the show. She wins the Princess Rooney, a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint with a 97 Beyer speed figure down at Gulfstream Park. Older males on turf, long on value. We saw him at the top talking about the Grade 1 Highlander. He wins the Grade 1 win and you're in race to get in to the turf sprint at Churchill Downs in November and the Highlander at Woodbine. And the older females on turf. Lady Alexandra, she runs that game second, and I talked about how impressed I was with that effort from her. A 103 Beyer running second in the Highlander at Woodbine for Grand Motion. There you have it, the best performances from a Beyer speed figure standpoint this past weekend on the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show. Let's take a quick look at the DRF TV schedule of events for what's to come for this holiday week. July the 4th, coming up dead smack in the middle on Wednesday. You're going to have all sorts of DRF Bets races of the day. You'll have the Watchmaker Watch. You will have, you name it, Out of the Gate, DRF Players Podcast, all the usual suspects. Big weekend of racing coming up this weekend. You got Stars and Stripes Festival out at Belmont Park. You got the Delaware Oaks that's going to be going on. You name it, a lot of things. You're going to want to stay tuned to DRF TV. If you're over on YouTube listening to this, podcast form, like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. You also have Spotify now where you can find all of our offerings. But if you're on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, but you'll get all the videos, all the content that we've got this week, this big week, Stars and Stripes week. It's going to be all over on the YouTube channel, Daily Racing Form's YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. If you listen to this podcast on iTunes, give us a positive rating, give us a little bit of a review, whatever else it may be, greatly appreciated. If you've listened live on Tuesday, live.drf.com, livestream.com, Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. Thank you for doing so. If you want to follow me on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt, questions, comments, concerns, fire away, tweets on there. I'm usually pretty good at responding. If you want to leave some sort of a remark underneath the video player on YouTube, I occasionally check that out as well. So without further ado, we are going to transition out of this show. We'll get you ready. Again, find out all that other stuff. Video.drf.com. We got plenty of good things coming up this week. Until we speak again in the preview edition coming up on Friday. Best of luck however you're playing, whatever you're playing, wherever you're playing. This has been the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show.